Thank you. Welcome back, where we talk about exercise. God designed this living machinery to be in daily activity, and in that activity is its preserving power. So what's a preservative? Something that stops you going bad or off. And I find that when I meet people in their latter years of life who are in good working order, it's because they're active. And you might have heard of the Blue Zone. National Geographic looked at groups of people who commonly live till a very long life. In fact, they even eventually wrote a book called The Blue Zone. And the three main people that they looked at was the Okinawans, which is a Japanese group. I think it's an island, and they commonly live to their into their hundreds. But it's not just long life, it's quality of life. These people are still active, even when they're 100. They also looked at the Sardinians, which is an Italian group, and they also live long lives and quality of lives. But also in Lehman University, they looked at a group of Seventh-day Adventists who also live long lives and quality of life. Now, there were three common denominators with these three groups of people. One was they're very social. Another was that they eat food in its natural state. Some of them eat meat, but if they do eat meat, it's a very small part of the diet, and it's usually healthy meat in a natural environment. But the third common denominator was they're very active. In fact, the journalist was trying to keep up with one Sardinian man who was climbing up this big mountain to check his goats, and this guy was about 90, and the journalist could hardly keep up with him. So, always active. The body must move. Strength comes by exercise. There's no other way. And stagnant pools breed disease. Stagnant bodies breed disease. You gotta move. Now, there is a type of exercise that the exercise physiologists today are claiming is the most powerful form of exercise. It's the high-intensity interval training. So as the name implies, this high-intensity interval training are intervals of high intensity. So let's define high intensity. So high intensity is anything that gets the heart rate up and get you breathing deeply. So my husband and I, we live in a fairly hilly area. We're up in the mountains. So in our morning exercise, we run up hills. Now, not everyone can run. So if you can't run, try an exercise bike. In fact, most of the research that's been done on the high intensity interval training has been done on an exercise bike, because you're holding on, especially if you're a little unstable, and you can go really, really fast, and then recovery time is going a little slower. In fact, recovery time is usually going a lot slower. So high intensity is running as hard as, or cycling as hard as fast, or swimming, or push-ups, or if you have those little trampolines, jumping really high, or jogging on the rebounder. It's got to be high intensity. And the research is showing that 30 seconds high intensity is a good amount. Now, you might think 30 seconds isn't very long. Try it. Try running as hard as you can up a hill for 30 seconds. Now, when I first read of this, I was so impressed, I started to try it. When I get to 20 seconds, my body says, that'll do. When I get to 25 seconds, my body says, this is ridiculous. When I get to 30 seconds, I feel like I'm dying. That's what you've got to get to. This is no gentle stroll. It's like anything in life. The more you put into it, the more you will get out of it. Well, what's recovery time? The research is showing that the best recovery time is not just standing still, but it's actually moving a bit. Often with recovery, I'm just doing some stretches, maybe stretching legs. I haven't got the skirt on today that allows me to squat or do the good leg stretches. I don't wear this skirt on my morning walk. Very important that you have comfortable clothes and very, very warm clothes, but not too warm because you're going to get warm. Someone said to me, when I asked them if they exercise, they said, oh, it got too cold. I said, no, it's the best time because your body is going to get very, very warm. In fact, the best way to warm the body is move the body. That's the way God meant for our bodies to get warm, is to move. I've got a friend, his name's Dr. Jonathan Gibbs. He's got 3 PhDs. He lives in Los Angeles. And one of his PhDs was the effect of exercise on the cell. And he told me that when you get to your high intensity, to that 30 seconds, he said a network of capillaries is opened in the body that equals the distance around planet Earth. Oh, I can hardly get my mind around that one. That's quite incredible. I used to suffer from cold feet all the time. In fact, often I'd be sitting in my little ensuite with my feet in the hot water to just try and warm them up. I don't get cold feet anymore. It's because of exactly what Jonathan Gibbs said, because it opens a network of capillaries way out to your extremities. One lady said to me, my little girl complains because every morning I'm dressing her and my hands are cold. She came to Misty Mountain, she heard about the high intensity exercise, she emailed me 6 weeks later, she said, my little girls are very happy because my hands aren't cold anymore, because she's exercising. You see, cold hands and cold feet are like naughty children. Don't let them be. Don't let them be. Don't let them get cold. In bed, we're always warm, is that right? Well, when you get out of bed, you're going to get cold unless you put some warm clothes on, yeah? So in the winter, my feet never touch the ground, because if I get out of bed and put my feet on the ground, what's going to happen to my feet? They're going to get cold. You've got to go to great lengths to keep your body warm, because perfect health requires perfect circulation. Your feet and your hands should always be as warm as the middle of your body. Now, I'm only slight, so I get cold very quickly. So I go to great lengths to put warm clothes on. I've got woolen stockings on, I've got a woolen skirt on, I've got a cashmere jumper and another cashmere jumper. I go to great lengths to keep warm, because I know that the health of my body is partly dependent on me ensuring proper circulation, which means my whole body is warm. Any part of your body that gets cold, the blood's not going down there. You see, we're warm-blooded creatures, and it's the blood that's the warmth. And if my hands were cold, they'd be really white. And if they get cold, and I rub them together and hit them together like this, they'll start to get warm, and they'll become pink. What's warmed my hands? The blood. I've just drawn the blood into that area. And last night when we looked at the immune system, we looked at a little bit more detail in the blood. The most powerful way to move the blood is exercise. That's what exercise does, especially this high intensity. So recovery time. Recovery time takes usually about 90 seconds. That's if you're quite fit. If you're not fit, your recovery time might be a little bit longer. Dr. Al Sears, in his book Pace, he's known as the exercise doctor. He gives the story of a lady who did 7 seconds high intensity and she needed 15 minutes to recover. Whew. Now, she won't need 15 minutes the next day. Maybe the next day it'll be 12 minutes. And if she continues this every day, her recovery time will get less and less. Your fitness is not determined by how hard and fast you run, or cycle, or swim, or whatever works for you, but by how long you take to recover. So note your recovery time. So the book Pace, the first word is progressive. This is progressive. The more you do it, the stronger you get, and the less recovery time you will need. So that's quite exciting. And age has got nothing to do with this. Did everyone get that? Age has got nothing to do with this. because muscle knows no age. So whether you're 9 or 90, you can have strong muscles. I fly a lot. Last time I was on the plane to America, I went into documentaries and I found a documentary of 90-year-old athletes. 90-year-old athletes. Wow, you should have seen these guys and some ladies. They're fit. This high-intensity interval training is usually done for a cycle of 6. So does that come to? Was that 12, 30 minutes? That's not long, is it? It's actually not long at all. Michael and I used to do a half-hour walk every day, 2 kilometres. We don't anymore. It's come down really, really short, which I'm so glad, because I've got a lot of stuff to do in the day. So I do the high-intensity interval training. I only have to leave myself 15 minutes. I run. Now let me just comment on running for a minute. It's very important when you run to not run on the cement or the tar. You've got to run on the earth, because that will give you a bit of give. And if you notice how children run, they always run on their toes. You see, our feet have been designed for us to run on our toes, but some jogger brands, in fact most of them, have you noticed what they've done? They've padded the heel to encourage heel striking. There's a book called Born to Run by Christopher McDougall, and he was a runner, used to get lower back problems a lot, hamstring problems, and he decided to take a few months to investigate running. And he went all over the world investigating different runners, and he found some barefoot runners. In 1960 and in 1964, Abebe Bikila. Has anyone here heard of Abebe Bikila? Abebe Bikila won gold in the Olympic Games. He's an African, but he's a barefoot runner. Nike and Reebok hate him. He was a barefoot runner. Now, I think those feet must have been pretty tough. But Christopher McDougall, he actually searches out and he finds a few barefoot runners. And when you run barefoot, you always hit with your toes. Always hit with your toes. Now, after that book was printed, then came the barefoot running craze. Now, you know today you can even go into a shop and pay $200 still for a pair of joggers that are barefoot joggers. Have you seen that? When you buy joggers today, you should be able to press them up against each other. So you want the thin-soled joggers. So when I read this book, I went straight to the shop and bought some thin-soled joggers. I thought they'd be a bit cheaper, but they're not. And I love them because it's almost like you've got nothing on your feet. You spring along. But as I started to do my running in my barefoot joggers, well, they're not barefoot joggers, but thin-soled joggers, oh, my legs and my glutes, all my muscles so sore. I had sore muscles for a whole week. What does that tell you? You're using totally different muscles when you run by your toe strike compared with your heel strike. And if you go barefoot on grass and do a run, you will never run on your heel. Your body will not let you run on your heel. In fact, running on your heel, heel striking, jars your lower back, jars your pelvis, jars your knee and your ankle joints, and also overstretches your hamstring. And that's where you have trouble. So if you're a runner, go to your toe striking. And you've probably seen, you can even buy joggers now with toes. Have you seen those? They're really soft. I said to one lady, I said, yeah, but how do you wear socks? She said, well, you buy socks with toes. You can even buy socks that have got the toes in them. So I don't quite go to that. But what you want to look for, if you're a jogger, you want to go for your thin-soled joggers. And if you do jog, it must always be on the earth. Because so many people who are runners find that by the time they're in their 50s, they're starting to have lower back, hip, knee, ankle, because of the constant jarring. So be very mindful of that. Dr. Al Sears, in his book PACE, what the PACE means is progressive. This is progressive. The more you do it, the fitter you get, the easier it will get, the less time it takes. So progressive is the P. A is acceleration. You are moving. This is no gentle stroll. You're moving. And you've got to find out what works for you. So that's A for acceleration in PACE. What's the C? The C is cardiopulmonary. Cardio is heart. Our exercise coordinator at Misty Mountain Health Retreat is Howard. Howard's worked with us for about 17 years now. And our guests think that he's about 38 and he's 54. He's very, very fit. And he's Dutch Indonesian, so he's got slightly dark skin. And you know, the dark skin doesn't seem to wrinkle as quickly as the white skin. And he loves exercise. His resting heart rate is about 46 beats per minute. Now, he hasn't inherited that. That is moving that heart muscle. The more you move it, the stronger it gets and the less it has to beat. Because it gives such a powerful beat, it pumps so much blood with one pump that it doesn't have to pump as much. So the C means cardiopulmonary. Pulmonary is lungs. The Framingham Heart Study, I mentioned it last night, famous study. The Framingham Heart Study found that by the age of 50, most people had lost 40% lung capacity. By the age of 80, most people had lost 60% lung capacity. So when you lose 40% lung capacity, does that mean 40% of your cells aren't getting near as much oxygen? Yeah. And remember what oxygen does, it's what gives power, it's what gives more energy. So if you've lost lung capacity, how can you regain it? High intensity interval training. And if you do the high intensity interval training, you will not lose your lung capacity. Isn't that good news? So PACE, progressive acceleration, cardiopulmonary exertion. You are exerting yourself. This is no gentle stroll. I have another book in our library. It's called Body by Science, and it's by Dr. Doug McGuff. And what I'm ever thankful to for this doctor is he takes you inside the cell. So we're going to go inside the cell and have a look at what exercise does. We've already gone inside the cell a few times this week. The CBD, Central Business District of the human body, the glucose goes in and it goes through a 20-step pathway. And the end result of the 20-step pathway is a chemical form of glucose called pyruvate. This 20-step pathway delivers to us 2 units of energy. Isn't that why we eat? We eat to get glucose that gets burnt in the cell to give us energy. Now, the chemical form of glucose, it gets fed into another area, and it's called the powerhouse, because this 8-step pathway gives us a very impressive 36 units of energy. So what makes the difference? It's oxygen. So this is what's called an aerobic pathway, because it uses oxygen. This pathway is called anaerobic. It's called anaerobic because it doesn't use oxygen. So this pathway produces energy by the process of fermentation, whereas this pathway produces energy because of the presence of oxygen. What a difference oxygen makes. By the way, students, how are you going to feel if every single one of your 100 trillion cells has got enough oxygen to get down to there? We're not going to be able to hold you down. You're going to have so much energy. Have you seen the kids running back into the house after they're riding up and down the paths a few times? Energy. You want that energy? What have you got to do? You've got to get out on the bike. You've got to go up and down with that. I also showed you how that when we don't burn all our fuel, the body stores some as glycogen. Glycogen's a name given to quick-release glucose stores. We looked at it earlier. So the glucose, when we eat it, number one, it's sent to the cell. Some of it is stored as glycogen. That's your quick-release glucose stores. And when we looked at diabetes, we showed how that's a very important backup of fuel. But on a high carbohydrate diet, many people have still got glucose left over, and so now it gets stored as fat. So let's draw our fat cells. Here they are here, getting bigger and bigger on the high carbohydrate diet. Most people don't realise that wheat and sugar gets stored as fat. Now what I want to show you is what's happening in there when you're doing this high intensity interval training. So we're getting to the end of our first set of high intensity, the first set of 30 seconds. 20-step pathway speeds up, no wonder. 8-step pathway speeds up. But this 20-step pathway is very fast. And this 8-step pathway is slower. So when your 20 steps speeds up and your 8 steps speeds up, actually a problem starts to arise. As you're sitting here right now, they actually feed quite nicely into each other. But when you start moving, when you start running up a hill, and both these pathways speed up, because of how fast this one's going, and there's a rate-setting enzyme in there keeping this one slower, we're making more pyruvate than can be fed into the 8-step. And so now the body stores it as lactic acid. You've heard of lactic acid? Now I've got some exciting news. I think this is the most exciting part of this presentation. In recovery time, what's recovery time? In recovery time, your liver converts that lactic acid back to pyruvate and feeds it into the powerhouse. So when you're in recovery time, just resting a little bit, you're burning just as much fuel as when you're running for your life. Isn't that good news? But there's more. So when you're in recovery time, that's when you stop and you're looking at the view, is that right? When you're climbing a mountain, it's a good idea to stop and look at the view a bit, isn't it? When you're stopping and looking at the view, you're burning just as much fuel as when you're climbing hard. So that's good news, but something else is happening. Your lactic acid is being mopped up. Every recovery time, you're mopping up excess lactic acid. And if you don't mop up the excess lactic acid, what happens to the lactic acid? Builds up. Oh, that hurts. And when you've got a lot of lactic acid building up in the tissues, in the cells, that's creating an acid environment. And yesterday, when we looked at the acid-alkaline balance, actually it was only half an hour ago, when we looked at the acid-alkaline balance, where does disease grow? In the acid environment. Let's move on. We're actually getting to our second and third set of high intensity, and the glycogen stores are being plucked. Remember, they're quick-release glucose stores. When you need them, they just get plucked, fed through the pathways, plucked, fed through the pathways. But we're getting to our fourth set, and our glycogen stores have all been used up. And the body goes, what are we going to do now? We're running out of fuel. And so the body's got something else up its sleeve. It releases the human growth hormone. The human growth hormone is a naturally occurring hormone which is active when we're growing. I haven't grown much after the age of 16. Often girls don't. My son, he grew 2 inches from 21 to 23. Boys can be growing a lot longer. It's usually good news to boys. So my human growth hormone, when I stopped growing, when we stopped growing, it went into retirement. But in a crisis, and your body sees this as a bit of a crisis, you're running for your life. Wow, we need some help here. the human growth hormone is activated from the pituitary gland. Now, the human growth hormone is often called youth hormone, and you'll see why when I explain what it does. So the human growth hormone is activated, and it causes a release of hormone-sensitive lipase. Hormone-sensitive lipase is an enzyme that breaks down fat, but it particularly breaks down your fat stores, because isn't that what fat is? It's just stored fuel. And remember, we're running out of fuel. The glycogen stores have all been plucked. So the human growth hormone is activated. It causes a release of hormone-sensitive lipase that starts breaking up your fat stores, and your body stops burning glucose as fuel and becomes a fat burner. Now, the reason why your body starts burning fat as fuel is because glucose, it burns at 4 calories per gram. Whereas fat, it burns at 9 calories per gram. Now, every weight loss book will have that information in psychedelic colours as the reason why you should stop the fat if you want to lose weight. But they don't understand what a calorie is. A calorie is a unit of energy. So if you want a high energy food, what do you eat? Fat. Now, I'm not suggesting we drink cupfuls of oil or fat. Nuts, seeds, coconuts, a little bit of coconut oils. But you can see why the human growth hormone causes the body to start burning fat as fuel, because it's going to give more than twice the units of energy that glucose will give. The human growth hormone increases the body's ability to utilise protein. This week we've looked at the importance of protein. We've looked at the importance of eating sufficient protein. We've looked at the importance of not drinking a lot of water with your meals, so you're not watering down your hydrochloric acid so you can break down your protein. Now we're looking at another aspect, and the high intensity interval training with your high intensities causes a release of the human growth hormone, which increases your body's ability to utilise protein. You see, when you do that high intensity in the morning, you're laying a bed of hot coals at the cellular level. And if you've got a fire with a bed of hot coals, you can put huge logs in there and it'll burn the brighter. It's as simple as this. If you want to eat, you've got to work for it. So when you do the high intensity interval training in the morning, come back, have your hot shower, and what do you do after the hot shower? Did you try it this morning? Did the neighbours hear you screaming? You know what that quick cold does? It equalises the circulation, has an incredible tonic effect. I'm sure it would have this morning, it was a bit cool. But it also, it increases cell repair. Cold is a wonderful tonic. Of course we don't like it, we're warm-blooded creatures, but that's why it has such a tonic effect, because the body actually reacts to that cold touching us. So when you did your high intensity interval training, had your hot and cold shower, had your water when you got back, now you have laid a bed of hot coals at the cellular level, and you can sit down and put the logs in, the millet, and the quinoa, and the coconut yogurt, and the nuts, and the seeds, and the fruits. And your body will just burn the brighter, because you've made a way available so that that fuel gets burnt in a powerful way. The human growth hormone also increases the circulation of the blood to the skin. And when you increase the circulation of the blood to the skin, you slow down aging. That's good news. The movie stars pay $1,000 a week for this, and I'm offering it to you cut price today. 15 minutes of high intensity interval training a day will cause a release of the human growth hormone, and that human growth hormone will remain active for 24 hours. What a bargain. You just got to find out how to fit it in. Now, I used to think that I didn't need to exercise because I'm always busy. I'm gardening, running here, running there. I thought I'm doing enough. And this happened about 13 years ago. I was asked to go to New Zealand to give a lecture, and it was a weeks-long seminar. And the lady I stayed with was a Maori lady, and she was twice my size, 10 years younger than me. And she said to me, "I go for a 5K walk every day. Do you want to join me?" Now, I still had kids at home at that time, still had a few teenagers at home. And in the morning, I'd get up and wake the kids and put the wash on and put the breakfast on. And I didn't have to do that. There was just me. I was free. So I said, "Yeah, I'll join you for a 5K jog." After 3Ks, I could hardly keep up with her. Now, she's twice my size. I'm their health teacher. It's a bit embarrassing. When I woke up the next morning, I could hardly move. My legs were so sore. She said, "Are you coming this morning?" I said, "Sure." I'm the health teacher. I got to go. It was very embarrassing. That night when I got up to lecture, it just killed me to move. I was just smiling, and I learnt my lesson. That's when I realised being busy all day is not enough. It is not enough. So what I did, and what I had to do to be able to do this, I started walking at 5:30 every morning. If I walked at 5:30, I could fit it in. Now, to walk at 5:30, I had to make sure that I was well in bed by 9, so that I would wake at 5. Every time I wake, I always do my prayer. I've got a lot of children to pray for, a lot of sick people to pray for, a lot of staff to pray for. It takes a while. I always read my Bible, and then at 5:30 that I would walk. Now, because I don't have any children at home now, and you know what it's like with children, you love it when they're there and you love it when they go. You're free. One lady said, "I don't know what to do. My children have left home and they've gone to university." I said, "Rejoice." You've worked hard. Now you've got some time. And so, yes, I am enjoying that time. Mind you, when I get home next week, I'll have 3 little grandsons staying with me. What are they? 7 and 11 and 12, something like that. So I'll be busy in my home then, and I will love that week. I will love it when they're there, and guess what else? I will love it when they go. It's all right. In fact, the Bible says, "I have learned in all things that whatever state I am in, to be content." That's a powerful thing in the mind, to be content no matter what you're doing, no matter where you are, because there's always something to be thankful for. So I'll have a little bit of Chaos Castle in my house next week. Do you know what these little boys do all day long? Play in the creek. They're just in the creek all day long. Winter, summer. I come home from work and there are piles of dirty clothes there. They must have fallen in the creek and got a few more clothes. I love second-hand shops. I've got piles of clothes for them all. And those little boys, they never stop. They've got lots of energy. What do you do to get that energy? You're active. I read in an old book, it said, in a short time, you will so experience the benefits of pure air and exercise, you would not live without these blessings. Can you see why I memorised that? And tomorrow I'm going to show you how you can do that. I don't have a great memory, but I just work at it. I work at it to get those words and put them in there. So you can see that you can access what the movie stars pay $1,000 a week for by just implementing this exercise. You just got to find out how to fit it into your day. Because I think we've all got 15 minutes, is that right? If you don't think you've got 15 minutes, just have an assessment of what you do with your time in the day. How much time do you spend watching television? How much time do you spend on your computer, on your iPhone, on your iPad? Just address all that. But there is a form of exercise that is probably the most accessible no matter who you are and no matter what age you are, and that is rebounding. Rebounding is a little mini trampoline. Now, Albert Carter, he wrote a book on rebounding. I think he wrote his book in about the 80s or 90s. You see, he was an Olympian trampolinist. And he married and had a couple of little children, and they would do a trampoline show. They would go from town to town doing all these tricks on the trampoline. And he noticed that his little 4-year-old girl, he could hold her feet, her ankles, and she could do one-arm push-ups. Have you ever tried one-arm push-ups? Even a 4-year-old finds that very hard. And his little boy was 7, and he would challenge kids at school. He'd do 1,000 push-ups. And he scratched his head and he thought, why are my kids so strong? I don't know if he ever looked in the mirror, but you know, he was built like this. No weight building, just trampolining. So he began to investigate, why was this form of exercise so powerful? And he found it very hard to get any documentation on this until he came to NASA. And NASA discovered that the trampolining or the rebounding was the only form of exercise that increased the G-force of their astronauts to be able to handle going out of space. And what NASA found was when their astronauts got back from out of space, they had lost 25% muscle strength and also bone strength. And what rebounding did, it reduced that loss because in outer space there's no gravity. And rebounding defies gravity more than any other form of exercise because you're constantly going up against gravity. So what NASA found, that this was the only form of exercise that prepared their astronauts for no gravity, and it was the only form of exercise that returned their fitness quickly, which is what they needed. But Albert Carter, he was even more intrigued as to why. Why was this such a powerful form of exercise? And this is what he found. He found it's the only exercise that defies gravity. Well, most exercise defies gravity, but no exercise defies gravity the way this does. So number one, he called them the 3 teachers, defies gravity. And he found that Einstein acknowledged this, that these 2 other teachers, the body doesn't know the difference between them and defying gravity. And one is acceleration. See, when you're on the rebounder and you're jumping up, you're accelerating. And when you get to the peak of your jump, acceleration stops and you get deceleration. And then as you go down, you're accelerating again. Then when you hit the mat, deceleration, then up again. So you're constantly doing acceleration and deceleration at the same time as you're defying gravity. So these 3 forces come together and explains why it's such a powerful form of exercise. And every single cell in the body is getting constantly shocked. Every time you jump on the mat, it's a shock, 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 shock. So every single cell in the body is getting strengthened. Bones are getting strengthened. And regarding cells, that's what we are. We're just a whole bunch of cells. It's the most powerful form of exercise there is the rebounding, and yet the most simple. What Albert Carter has also written is a whole book on eyesight and how rebounding strengthens eyesight. How does it do that? Well, yes, the rebounding affects the eyes as it affects every cell in the body. But try this, I do it every day, is when you're rebounding and you're jumping, your focus, say for me, outside I'm rebounding in my house and I've got big glass doors and I look out and my car's there and in front of my car's the veranda with my hanging pots. So I'll focus on a flower in the hanging pot and the car is doing this in my peripheral vision. and then I'll change my focus to the handle on the car, and then the plant that I had just focused still, it starts to jump. So every 10 jumps, I change my focus, change my focus, change my focus, change my focus. I've got gum trees out there, and then I've got pine trees there, and I've got a branch there, and then there's a wallaby sitting there in the front yard. Can you see that? You just keep changing your focus, and it strengthens your eyesight. And it makes rebounding such fun, constantly refocusing. What Albert Carter also shows, if someone has poor balance, it'll actually restore your balance. And how many people don't want to rebound because they think they'll fall off? Well, you can get a handle on your rebounder. But if you don't have the handle, just hold on to something nearby. Hold on to a chair, hold on to something nearby until you get your balance. Now, why does rebounding reset balance? Rebounding resets balance because your balance is set by the fine mechanisms in your ear and also your receptor sites that you have on the bottom of your feet. So constantly bounding resets that mechanism and also resets you've got your receptor sites that are helping reset your balance. But probably one of the most amazing things about the rebounder is what it does to your lymphatic system. Your lymphatic system is your body's vacuum cleaner. It sweeps away waste from the tissues. And as I mentioned last night when we looked at your immune system, your capillary networks have muscles around them, and every time your heart beats, those muscles contract, which is pushing the blood away from your heart. And remember your second heart? Have you been working your second heart today? You automatically do when you walk, which is your calf muscle. And that's why in the plane you make your feet go up and down like this, because that's working your calf muscle. But your lymphatic system does not have a pump. So what activates your lymphatic system is movement. But the movement that activates your lymphatic system in the most powerful way is rebounding. So your lymphatic system is a network of capillaries, and there are little gates or valves all the way along those canals, and they're shut. They're shut when you wake up in the morning, and when you get up and walk around, some of them open. But when you rebound, they open in a powerful way. So when you're jumping on the rebounder, when you're up to the height of the jump, every gate opens. And when you hit the mat, every gate closes. And when you jump again, every gate opens. And when you hit the mat, every gate closes. So you get this pumping action of your lymphatic system. And your lymphatic system sweeps away waste from the tissues. And on our first night, we looked at the role of microorganisms in disease and how they're just opportunist organisms. They're just going to be found where there's a lot of waste. So activating your lymphatic system every single day, you only have to jump on that rebounder for 2 minutes and your lymphatic system is activated to the point where it'll stay activated all day. Activated meaning those little gates will keep opening and shutting. Because every time you move, every time you walk, every time you turn around, that helps to maintain your lymphatic system constantly moving. So for people who have edema, rebound. For people who are retaining fluid, rebound. For people with poor vision, rebound. For people with the balance problems, rebound. For people with incontinence, rebound. One lady said, no, I stopped rebounding because if I rebound, I feel like I'm going to be incontinent. I said, that's because that's the very muscle that's strengthened when you rebound. And when you get your rebounder and children visit, where will they be? On the rebounder. I've come to the conclusion that people get old because they stop jumping. It's time to jump. And if you're a little uncertain, all you have to do is start with this. That's all you have to do. You don't have to leave the mat. The best is you jump, but just get yourself used to it. One of the best knee Rebounders is the knee duck. It's an American rebounder, but they have an Australian distributor. So I'm warning you against the $29 jobs that you'll find in the in the sports shop, because it's almost just like jumping on the ground. And some say, well, can't you skip? Can't you just jump? Every time you land on the ground, you're actually jarring your body. The beauty of the rebounder is you've got this bounce, so there's no jarring. There's no jarring at all. So people with knee, ankle and hip problems, it's the best form of exercise there is. In fact, if every office had a rebounder in the corner and everyone in the office rebounded for 1 minute every hour, I think the office would be closed about 3 o'clock in the afternoon because all the work would be done. The people's minds would be so much clearer. So it is one of the, it is classified as the most powerful exercise that there is rebounding, and yet it's the simplest. Now the figures are, and Albert Carter states that you only have to do 3 minutes 3 times a day. That's not very much, is it? Or you can implement your high-intensity interval training on it. Some people like their morning stroll, nice and quietly through the trees. I said, do your morning stroll, but when you come back or before you go, do your interval training. A friend of mine was saying that she watched her little boy, I think he was about 5 at the time, and he'd be playing with his Lego, and she said about every half hour he just jumps up and rebounds for a couple of minutes and comes back and plays with Lego again, and then jumps up and rebounds again. Now, who told him to do that? He just naturally does it. So it's time to move the body. It's the best insurance policy that you can make, is just taking that little time every day. You just got to work out what suits you. In fact, you can't afford not to do it. The dividends that it will give you far exceed the effort that you put into it. It's time to move the body. Remember, strength comes by exercise. There is actually no other way. Are there any questions before we close? Yes.